Friends, colleagues and listeners, here I am with somebody that I've got to know and like. That's probably the first time I've said I like him.
I think it is.
But no, he's a good lad, and I've enjoyed his company, but I also enjoy what he and his colleagues are doing. The person I'm talking about is Andy Clemson, who's the co-founder and director of Calibrate Learning and Calibrate Technology. Andy, we've been talking about this for a long time. Lovely to have you on board.
Yeah.
And now I'm looking forward to a few little podcasts. So first thing I want to ask you, just tell us and your listeners and the listeners a little bit about how you got into this particular Calibrate mode and why you love aviation so much.
Right, Chris. So we'd have to go back to the dark days of COVID to answer that one.
Yeah.
So clearly industry in crisis. We, for the last 20 years, not just aviation, but a wide range of different organisations were, like aviation, dead in the water during that period. And it's something we'd been thinking about for a while, particularly myself and my business partner Stuart in Glamorgan, which was, we need a bit of a reset really, because we've historically delivered leadership training, classroom based, and looking at outcomes, but we knew we could do it better.
Yep.
And what we wanted was a platform stroke tech solution to support that.
Yep.
In terms of when you've come off the course, what happens next? And that's the bit of why we set up Calibrate. Learning is the training arm, if you like, but Calibrate tech is the driver.
And not being just a production line,
Nope.
where you pump people out and then you wait for the next one and then you wait for the next group. It must be more rewarding to see how you're able to develop and check the competency and get involved in practical checkouts, which we've spoken about.
Yeah, so I hope it's not too many technical questions, Chris, because you're going to speak to James, who is James Bond Q variant, who's the tech expert, who's the developer or the main developer, and he will tell you more about that. But basically, it's the ability to access a wider range of people in an organisation rather than just scratch the surface where you don't maximise your impact. And that's what Calibrate tech allows us to do. But it's backed by competency, focus, clarity of expectation, and then how you roll that competency development forward. Utilising the agility of the technology.
And the workshop I was on, where I was looking at you and some of the guys that are with you, you've got a really, really good eclectic mix. And one of the guys in particular who I loved listening to and talking with was Tony. You know, major in the army, and
we call him a sergeant major, Chris, but he is a major.
But his stories and the way he aligns, you know, practical exercises with theoretical scenarios. I thought it was so good the way he put it across.
Well, again, we've tried to go across an eclectic range of both special matter experts. We've asked people like yourself different questions. Tony has a very different background in terms of he is military from a logistics and safety perspective, but it brings in so much more than just regurgitating, the same information that people have done in the same industry for years and years and years. So again, I had the same experience in pharmaceuticals, for example. A lot of the training that you received was from people that were doing it with the same companies the next week and the week after. So we're trying to do something that's different, but that makes a difference. That's what we're after.
And the other thing I like, and it's not a criticism, but after COVID and obviously getting people in front of regulatory and certain criteria that they had to be trained in, the surge in LMS and should we say convenient training. Understand, and the content in many is good and the way they control it in many is good, but an awful lot of it slipped. Because it became a tick box exercise, and if you don't get it right the first time, you do it the second time and the third time. And then unfortunately when people were in the realities of a real life situation, the practical skills weren't there. And I think that was a worry and also a heightened risk. And then with so many people leaving the industry because they had a step back, reflect on life, do I want to keep doing this? It's a big change. So I think what you're doing with the practical balance and the checkouts, but also the follow-up and the validation and verification sides of things, I think that's long overdue.
Well, one of the biggest drivers, Chris, was through COVID, there was massive attrition. A lot of it was forced because of circumstance and all the rest of it. So when it started to come back, you've now got less people, right? With, in a lot of cases, even the people that are recruited, with less experience, but because of the lack of staff, you've now added in the pressure of additional responsibilities in a safety environment, which for me is not a clever mix. So again, the Calibrate focus was, how do we start to improve competency quickly? You know, to actually start having the right impact. But not just a few here and a few there, because the thing is with training, historically, it's always been expensive, particularly if it's that face-to-face invention. Whereas through the platform, and I'm not talking about LMS, the platform is something very different that we'll get into. It's different. It's how you actually access that wider range of opportunities.
No, I agree with Andy. And one of the things that came out in the workshop, which I was really impressed with and surprised to a point, was the emphasis on the fact that you've got certain grids, you've got certain competency support, or the weapons of success to give to people. But the fact that you try with your clients to only identify the critical ones, and then let them take over the intellectual property and also the training capability under a subscription model, which allows them to reduce their costs or keep their costs down. And you don't also sheep dip everybody in the same position. If somebody's good at something, why send them on a sheep dip exercise with everybody else? Because all it actually does is if you walk into a classroom and you've got 3 people who are always answering the questions and always good, you intimidate the others, but you also take away the learning benefit. Yeah,
exactly right, Chris. So again, to hijack one of your statements, you know, if everything's critical, then nothing's critical, and it's right. So if you look at a general job description, which every person should have, but many still don't as a matter of interest, you know, it heavily focuses on task. But the first time people often see that is prior to the interview, and maybe the next time they see it is before a disciplinary. But it's never referenced either in between or after. So as what we want for consistency is a focus on giving people a clarity on what we want them to do. First step, put a line in the sand. So even when we've done that, which is done through the platform, it still doesn't mean they can actually do that. So first of all, then you've got to assess what's that level of competence. Because if you take traditional standard training, 14, 16 people walk into a classroom and they'll all have a very different level of competence. But any trainer will typically not know that. So what we're saying is when people actually attend any sort of training, it should be targeted based on they've had a self-assessment that's done through the platform, that's validated by a manager to say this is a true stage of, you know, where we're at. And equally then they know objectively why they are on that particular module. And that, Chris, avoids the sheep dip. Because now you're not sending all supervisors, for example, to a leadership intervention. You don't need to. You send them to the components of that they actually need. So straight away there's an impact on ROI because you're spending less money. And equally it's more interesting to the delegates because they know it's part of their progression and development. These are the skills they actually need.
No, it works well, Andy, and it, like I said, I love it because I've used the reference and the dovetail with the care program I'm doing, and the fact that, you know, you identify what an organisation genuinely cares about the people. That organisation is normally the one that's going to develop more and also get more out of those people, and then it helps with cost, revenue generation, everything. But most importantly, a very, very nice environment to work in.
Exactly, and it was one of our biggest frustrations. So the 20 odd years we've spent in aviation, various different organisations, was that I've always seen there's an over focus on the task. And what we often forget is in 90% plus of cases, it's people that generate the task output. But we don't focus enough on people and the capability of those individuals. Because if you do and you support them, that also has that motivational effect, which then affects retention, it affects succession and all the rest of it. So, you know, you've got to invest in your people if you want to make a difference.
And also not just relying on task outcomes, but behaviour and attitude.
But it's like a vicious circle, Chris, because, you know, as a senior manager, it's often easy to say, well, look, why should I invest in these people? Because if I look at my churn rates at the minute, they're massive. But what we don't look at typically is why the churn rates as high as they are. What's the bit in the middle that's causing that? And often it is the lack of focus. So if I'm the employee, what's in it for me? You know, because I may have ambitions, I may not. But if I have, how are you going to support that? But if I see nothing and I just see a tell culture, well, I'll put it with it for so long, but guess what? I'm looking around.
It's like that old story with the 2 brothers who run their own company and they've got a totally different outlook. And one of them says, Fred, why are we spending so much money training these people? Because once we train them, they'll leave us.
Yeah.
And the other one says, yeah, but if we don't train all these people, they'll stay with us.
Yeah, Branson used it a lot, doesn't he? And he's absolutely right.
Yeah.
You know, your people are your biggest asset, Chris, so support them.
Yeah.
A bit like your kids, right? You know, you send your kids to school, but when they come back from school, you know, the teaching really starts in terms of what you're going to do with that learning.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And it's the influence that your parents give you. But for me, that's what supervisory, you know, and particularly junior management is all about, is how you drive, you know, that sense of care, that sense of belonging. Because when people are at work for a long time, 8, 10, 12-hour shifts, you've got to feel part of something, because if you do, you'll typically do it better.
Yeah.
And it's that old equation, isn't it? P equals M times A. Performance is a factor of motivation and ability.
Yeah.
And if you don't focus on either of those, then you'll affect your performance.
Yeah. That's lovely. Right, we'll go into a lot more detail, I think, in some of the other sessions to come. But thanks so much for joining. I know it's taken us a long time to get round to this.
It's a pleasure, Chris. Worth the drive down.
Yeah. No, it's nice. And I've enjoyed it, and I know I'm going to enjoy those to come. So those that are listening, please continue to listen, because we've got a few good things coming up. Thanks very much, Andy.
Cheers, Chris. Thank you.